Hello and welcome to Inflection Point Conversations. I'm Michelle Obeda, an art director and 3D artist. In this podcast series, I'll be interviewing experts in the fields of art, architecture, and visualization. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the disruptive topics that have reached an inflection point in our industry. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe. You can also comment and give feedback. I'd love to reach more people and grow this amazing community. Today, I'm talking with Andy Christoforou. Andy is a licensed architect in New York and an AI and visualization specialist, currently working at KPF. He's passionate about enhancing project delivery through the integration of new technologies and is dedicated to exploring innovative workflows that drive efficiency and productivity in the field. Andy's expertise lies in leveraging artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and other cutting-edge tools to transform the architectural landscape and create immersive, impactful experiences for clients and stakeholders. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk about Viz and AI with you.
Yeah, me too. So you came to 3D NY, the meetup in New York last week, was it? And gave this incredible talk, and I feel like you blew everyone away. And I feel like as soon as you finished, the whole room gravitated towards you to be like, tell me more. How do I stay relevant? How do I keep my job? How do I beat AI?
Yeah,
Um,
it was a fun time. I'm glad. I'm glad 3D NY exists and that I was chosen as a speaker. But yeah, we're at such like an interesting point in our lives where in my presentation I was talking about like I've been doing this for 10 years, the
mm,
visualization side, and now we've hit a point where AI is basically doing what I've learned and done in like a minute, which is
yeah.
crazy. So it's gonna potentially displace people's jobs.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really good to be aware of it and to try and be on top of it because I feel like, as you see hints of this kind of thing happening, and, I know friends in different fields who have actually just lost out to work that, ChatGPT can replace, for example, quite easily. And the reality of it coming makes everyone scared. And I think one of the best things is to be in the know, to be less scared, I think, personally. Um, Let's get into it. I've got lots of great questions for you. As well as an architect, you're an XR and AI specialist. So, what got you into the XR space? And first of all, and how long have you been working with those tools?
Yeah, so I guess my first foray into VR about like 10 years ago, it was a thesis year of college, and I was actually really interested in how gaming technology could be used for architecture because it was thesis year and like we had all these drawings to make, and I felt it was kind of stupid to have to create drawings when we're designing 3D spaces. So why not visualize this in 3D? And growing up as a gamer, it just made sense. Like, why can't we use video game technology? It's rendering these beautiful environments in real time. Is there a way to marry architecture and game engines? So pair that with XR, and now you're able to explore in real time these photorealistic environments and see the spaces you're designing to scale. So right after college, I worked for a little residential architecture firm, and as a pilot, we wanted to take one of their projects and put it in VR and see if it actually made a difference. So we were typically spending about like 6 to 8 weeks on schematic design phase. So we tried VR out and we were able to cut down that phase to just one meeting, which was great. So we spent
Wow, yeah.
yeah, a week designing. We put it in VR and then put the client in there. They loved it. They basically signed off on everything. And then we moved forward. And that was kind of the start of it. And that's when I realized, wow, this has a lot of potential. And then I spun that off with a colleague of mine to create a company of ours. And we were a visualization consultant for many years. And that was about 10 years. And time really flies.
Is that Mythic VR?
Yeah, that's Mythic. And so that was kind of like our little brainchild to try and understand Viz, VR, and how it can impact AEC, real estate, and healthcare.
Yeah, that's great. And is that company still going, or have you stopped that?
It's like, now that I'm with KPF, it's definitely not as active as before. It was something I used to do full time. And, since then, it's just I've been so focused with KPF, and KPF has been like a great place to do more research and understand the workflows on a completely different scale. So I really like think, the experience of Mythic to kind of learning how to use all these tools that I think career-wise is probably like the best thing I've ever done because I was able to focus, learn these great tool sets, and then apply it to my job right now.
Yeah, that's awesome because I feel like for most companies, when you're in a studio in a company, you're doing that with R&D, and R&D really is very sidelined. Like every time, you might start a project, it really is at the whim of the paid work, right? So it's great to have a company where you can actually focus on it. That's awesome. Have you always been interested in the latest technology?
Yes, I love my expensive toys. It's just something that's always been so cool. I mean, it's just crazy because every year you can have the next iteration of something, and it's just so much better than before. And just in the span of 10 years of doing VR, how far the headsets have come, as well as just like
Mm.
our GPU processing power. Like back then, you needed to run around with like a mobile PC to kind of drive these VR experiences. And now you can stream VR from the cloud and you don't even need to
Yeah.
worry about hardware, or the hardware is a fraction of the cost of what it used to be. So it's crazy. But always been a passion of mine.
Do you find it hard to keep up with the latest technology?
It's exhausting. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many different things. Yeah. I mean, we were just
Get
talking about
whiplash.
headset. Yeah, seriously. And you've got so many competitors. So you're always comparing, you're making sure you have the best thing, and then you're reading reviews, and then you have to like go purchase the thing and then do your own R&D and see if it works with your own workflow. And, once you reach like a stable workflow and you're used to this headset or like this equipment, then it changes in the next year or two. And you can never be complacent, which is kind of
Yeah.
frustrating, but it's also good because it drives us to do better work. But it's a lot.
Yeah. It can be quite tough to see what everyone's doing all the time and be trying it, and not to get sidelined by other work, which often happens. I felt like that in my journey with real time and with Unreal has been like on off on off on off like that, which is kind of annoying because you'd love to just stay on and just get all the latest. Um, I think the only person I know who manages to stay on top, I think, is Alex Coulomb. I don't know if you saw my interview with him, but he even said it's really exhausting. And I don't know, he thinks he doesn't, but I mean, he seems to know every single latest thing.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I mean, from the hardware and software point of view, just looking at Unreal, like I remember the first version of Unreal Engine 4 that you had to pay for, and then they went free. And, from 4 to 5, just the updates with Lumen and Nanite, and then every point 1 iteration, huge changes. I really
Mm.
don't know how people can stay up with all the patch notes because that's just one piece of software. And like in our work, we've got like a dozen different pieces of software we need to use.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of exciting because I didn't use Unreal for about a year in the jump between 4 and 5. And when I started using 5, I was like pleasantly surprised by a lot of things. But then also, yeah, the learning curve was there again. Like right now we make materials slightly differently and it'll look better, but you have to go and watch all the YouTube videos again.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, these hidden settings. Um, I'd love to talk to you about AI. So you gave a presentation and at the meetup that I was talking about, and you were talking about your processes of using AI at KPF, and I guess like the practical processes of it and comparing it to a regular workflow. And yeah, when did you first start looking into AI for visualization or for architecture?
So it's definitely been maybe a year and a half ago, when like infancy of like when Midjourney was first revealed, and when Midjourney was like first starting out, it was interesting. But if you look at the version 1 of that model, it wasn't usable to any degree. So it was something we kept our eyes on, and then the AI summer happened, and we're like, okay, we should really be paying attention to this. And a lot of it has just been experimentation of what sticks within the studio. Like what are these AI workflows that are really useful? And one thing that people love is this idea of you can grab this like bare bone massing model that you just export out of Rhino real quick. You feed it into something like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney, and now you have a beautiful rendering in seconds. So you're no longer spending all your time modeling and rendering. And the thing I like to remind people is like the studios, they're not visual like experts. They're designers, they're architects. They didn't go to school. They didn't, train for ArchViz. So to give them, something they can use to simplify or reduce the tedium of their work is huge because they're no longer
Mm,
pulling all-nighters, modeling every single detail. No, they can get it, 50% of the way, send it off to AI, and it fills in the rest of the details. So that's been huge from a workflow perspective. So we've been looking for more and more wins like that. Like something we were just exploring right before this call is like we have all these images of projects that they're just completed and they're empty. But like we work on
mm.
a really big scale. Like you would never see an airport empty. So like how do we use AI to actually populate, these
Yep.
environments and not need a photographer to go back and take photos because you can't do that anymore. So these are all the things like I spend most of my time trying to understand and talking to designers and seeing what they're doing.
Mm. Yeah. And do you have like different kind of uses for it? I mean, so from the different design stages, so you might use it for the conceptual stage and you also use it sort of near the end at the finish stage. Can you tell me the difference maybe?
Yeah, so an established workflow we've got right now is anything for like concept phase or competitions. We really push mid-journey on that side,
Hmm.
mostly because you can generate look and feels and ideas of what the project should be early on, show that to the client, and start to reel in which direction to go. Then around schematic design, design development, this is where tools like Veros and Stable Diffusion are great because you have a model, you have a design, you're just asking the AI to enhance it. And then once you start creating nice imagery, you can use Photoshop, for your typical color correction or post-processing, but also generative fill to clean up any, messy edges. Because we found that it's really difficult to do really simple changes with Stable Diffusion and Veros. It's
Hmm.
just easier to bring into Photoshop and do your typical workflow. So we've kind of mapped out where you should be using each tool. And the studio's gotten it, which I'm so happy about, and we're able to work so much quicker.
Yeah. And is it just your Viz department who are using the AI tools or are some of the architects using it too?
No, it's the architects. We
Mm.
internally we have like a working group of designers who are, let's say, our power users, and that's like 200 people strong. So
Okay.
we part of the Viz team, we don't really handle too much of the production. We help with like strategizing and like support. So if you're running into any friction on your project, we usually come up with solutions or get them in contact with the right vendor to fix that. And then just like big picture, what technology should we be following? What tools you should be using at which phase. That's usually what we do on a rollout point of view.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I feel like yeah, the way the AI tools are being used by architects, I assume that they're kind of different in terms of using them for design as well as using for visualization. Do the architects use any AI tools for design as well? I guess there's like machine learning is a whole different thing, I understand.
Right. Okay. So I'll say in general, when we were first like introducing AI to the firm, the big concern was like, whoa, why are we trying to get rid of design work? Like design
Mm.
work as the designer is the fun part, right? So we are using AI in a way where we have total design control, but when it comes to the front end and deliverable creation, that's where AI is helping us. So instead of us, rendering something or modeling for a week, we can shrink that, but it's our design. It's very, very rare for us to say, "Oh, Midjourney, I want you to do all the designing for us," because like that's what we look forward to,
Yeah.
So understanding, or telling the studio like this is how it should be used, and they agree because like why do we want to give up design work has been great for them to adopt it because they understand, okay, we're not getting rid of the fun part, we're just trying to
Yeah.
get rid of the boring parts.
Yeah. Do you find, I know for Midjourney you were saying that you use it for like maybe reference and sort of early concept stages, which is great, but the replicating, so let's say you come up with an idea, maybe you're using Stable Diffusion or Veras for this, but even Veras, I only tried like an early version of it, but if you want to go back and make an iteration, do you have to accept that a lot of things are going to be different, or are you able to I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, can you recreate almost exactly the same image over and over again with your iteration from design.
hmm So the nice thing about Midjourney and Veros these days is they do have vary region controls. So you can keep that same image and vary like a certain portion of it. So
Mm.
if, we're using Midjourney, we can select one building and create design options for that one building. So like, oh, this is red brick, this is terracotta, this is, a dark gray stone. And it's just affecting that and it's blending with the rest of the image. So you
Mm.
don't need to lose that progress.
Yeah. Oh, that's really great. I feel like maybe that was something like when I tried it early on, replicating the same imagery was quite difficult. I guess with concept stages, that's not necessarily a big problem. Um, you were talking in your talk about like affecting your jobs. So AI affecting architect jobs, AI affecting visualization jobs. And that really hit on a point that I guess a lot of people want to know about. Can you maybe talk us through, what you said in your presentation and what your thoughts are on that?
Sure. So I started off with the example of how AI will affect architects. And because one of the reasons I did that is uh, from a legal standpoint, like you always need to have an architect, which is great because you have that kind of job protection. And the reality is like creating the pretty images and the design is like one small part of the whole process. Like if we're talking about the actual design work, what is that? Maybe like 15%. The rest of it is like creating documentation, it's collaborating with your consultants, your engineers, your contractors, the client. Like there's so much more admin stuff that AI can't touch right now because they can't have these
Mm.
conversations. So it's helping on like getting the deliverables for the design part out, but it's not touching the core part of what we do. And the parts that aren't as pretty as the images we're making with AI. And I think the idea of it being kind of like a legally protected profession is really important because at the end of the day, the architect's job is to ensure the health and safety of all the inhabitants. So it can't do, code, really good code analysis for us. It can't lay out like egress stairs and cores. It can't do any of that. And that's where our knowledge is safe. So that's why we're not too concerned on that front. So then
Mhm.
shifting gears to the ArchViz side, this is where I was saying I was like a little concerned to some degree because we've already had projects where, maybe traditionally we outsourced 10 images, but now we're outsourcing only 5 because Midjourney or Veras were able to fill in the details on the images we didn't render. So there's a hit there, and there's nothing to say legally. You have to use like a renderer to create these images. It really comes down to resources, whether that's time or money of what's available on like the competition or the job. Can we go and outsource this? If not, then we can rely on AI. And that's where the profession suffers a little bit because we can kind of, I don't want to say cut corners, but it's not something we need to get the job done.
Yeah.
Whether or not the renderings exist, the building will be built.
Yeah.
It's just, will that understanding happen of what the design will look like earlier on or later? That's where visualization is so important. But the design can progress. And I think the my main point with all this was to think about what can artists do to stay relevant. And one of the things I was harping on is like, what can you do that AI can't or can't touch? And I think once you understand that, then you're safe. I mean, just having these conversations like AI can't do this. AI can't ask the client what they need. Clients are never going to write their full prompt of what they need. It's really up to us to distill that into a design document. So that's why I think we're safe on that front. But on the visual side, it is a little scary because V6 of Midjourney looks phenomenal and the quality is like V-Ray quality. So it's like how do you can't really ignore that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was your advice? Was basically like ArchViz artists should be using AI as a way to not be displaced, I guess,
Yeah, so
replaced.
I think super early on, because usually what happens is when we're dealing with outsourcing imagery, there's this conversation of like, what is the time of day? Then there has to be draft modeling, draft renders that have to be done. But AI can handle a lot of that stuff, like the early stuff of like just framing different perspectives and the time of day and how to look before you start modeling. Like that's where you can save money. So instead of you spending, a week doing this draft exercise, you can figure that out through AI and then model from there. So in my perfect world scenario, I think that's where design or ArchViz artists can save, hours. So hopefully, their fees aren't impacted and they're doing less work. And the client doesn't even know. I mean, you can tell them that you are using AI, but I think they're so convincing at this point that they probably won't even know or care.
Yeah, actually, that was one of my questions. So I have a few questions from one of our listeners, and it was, do you think clients can tell the difference between AI and human-made imagery?
I mean, I
Like,
can't
have you?
speak for every human being, but I would say like 9 out of 10. I'll give you 9 out of 10 clients
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be able to tell. And some people don't even know like what AI is. Like we're in the know, so this is all
Hmm.
stuff we're used to, but just random people off the street, like will have no idea. And the only way to really tell if something's AI is if you're like zooming in and focusing on the details. So if it's a
Hmm.
quick image and you're flashing like, a photo in a deck, I think it'll go, undetected that it's AI.
Yeah. And one of the other questions is, do you think clients will care if it's been made by AI or a human?
Yeah, so here's my argument. Let's say it's a competition or like you're trying to win a job. So generally you have to do a lot of unpaid work, right? To generate this. So now you have AI that's taking all that time you would typically spend and just condensing it. So you're still getting the same output, but you're not doing the same amount of labor. And you as the curator, I mean, you have the expertise to know if the image is good or not, if it's response to the client's needs. That's what they're paying for. They're really paying
Mhm.
for your eye, not the manual work. So that's why I think it's totally okay as long as the work is being vetted and it's not just like junk being thrown at the client. I think it's totally fine. In my opinion, it's no different than having a junior staff member do the work for you.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really about the output and about being a curator. I feel like a lot of people have talked about AI tools like that. Um, you still have to sift through many different iterations of images and you have to be the one to do the prompting. One of the other questions was, do you think the client will experiment with AI themselves and actually give a more detailed brief? He said, will it replace the famous architect's drawing on a napkin? This kind of idea that they've sketched it out themselves. Have you seen that happen yet?
So what's interesting about that is like, I'll put my architect hat on. So when I was doing single family and residential, we would have some tech savvy clients that would download, some like crappy CAD program and then do a layout of their house and like, oh, this is what I want. Or they'd go to Pinterest and they create a look and feel board and they say, this is what I'm interested in. I think AI is just going to be more of that. And this goes back to like any design project still has a bunch of extra work that needs to be done. So if they have inspiration images, I think that's great. I mean, that's really what they're generating in Midjourney. They're not generating finished full-fledged projects. It's just a pretty shallow image. That's really it. And then us as a professional, we need to make it a reality, whether that's a 3D model or an actual building. That's where our value add is. But I don't think the client's going to do everything for us. And then in terms of the napkin sketch, I think that will always be a thing because architects communicate through drawings or any types of visualization. And there's going to be circumstances where you're sitting down in a conference room with a client and they're giving you, their prompt and you're going to sketch out ideas because it's just faster. You've got the napkin there, you've got the pencil. So it's just, AI is a tool. Like it's not going to displace any of our typical workflow. It's just an extra thing you can use.
Yeah. I just suddenly had a flashback to one of the times I went to a doctor and I said, like, look, I Googled the pain in my ankle and this is what it came up with. And they looked at me like despairingly, like, okay, Why did you come to me? I have the PhD, whatever. Yeah, so I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the crossover with AI and VR. I know you didn't really discuss this, and I wonder if there is any. Haven't really thought about that much before, but have you, because you're you're this sort of XR and AI specialist, have those fields crossed over for you?
So yes and no. I think we're probably going to see a lot of great functionality kind of come together to connect AI and VR. I think VR in general, let's say 3D rendering in general, is extremely complicated, and that's why I don't think AI has completely been integrated. But I think small steps will start to happen. Like first, like smart material creation. Like one thing that is super useful is you take a photo of a real life sample and then AI is generating those channels, right? So now you've got these beautiful models or beautiful materials that you spent, hardly any time on, and it's done that work. So this goes back to like the architect example of like reducing the tedium because like nobody likes doing
Yeah.
that. I guess texture artists do, but in general, that's not the greatest thing to be spending your time on. So the other thing that I'm expecting is just like more automation. So not really what's the best way to explain it? Like, I don't think we'll hit a point in the next year where we can say, oh, I need like a room in VR. It's these are the dimensions, it's got this type of
Mhm.
aesthetic, and that gets generated because there's so many different things going on. There's like the lighting, the materials, the collisions, like all the engine stuff that has to be done, your VR character settings, like that, I don't think can be touched yet. I think it's a little too complicated. But the little steps like, oh, automating the material creation, I think that's a good step. And I know we'll see more examples of like, oh, I have this reference photo. Can you apply it to my light settings? Like that automation. I know I keep saying automation, but I think that's the first step before AI really changes that type of work we're doing.
Yeah. Um, so I wanted to ask you that you sort of answered this a little bit. What advice do you have for any ArchViz artist who wants to stay relevant at the moment?
So for any ArchViz artist, I would continue like working on your modeling. I think modeling in general is a great skill, and I bring it up because I used the example before of architects creating these massing models and then AI taking over and polishing that. I think as long as you can have a massing of a space, AI can take over the rest. So I would focus more on like high quality modeling and like general composition than I would with like lighting and materials because I think that's where AI will start to automate some of that work for us.
Yeah. And do you feel like people that you hire in the future, let's say you're hiring in your department, you're going to hire people who know how to use like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney quite well? Is that a skill that you're going to start looking for?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a couple application or we have a couple openings right now, and like proficiency with AI is definitely desired because the whole studio is using it, right? So we want people that can come in, speak the same language, and just you know hit the ground running. So I think it's just one more skill you'll need on your resume. Midjourney, right under Blender or 3ds Max. I think Midjourney, Vera, Stable Diffusion, it's one more tool. And the great thing about them is like they are super powerful tools. But in terms of learning 3ds Max and Midjourney, you know what I mean? Like 3ds Max is like a 10 out of 10 on the learning scale. Midjourney is like
Mm,
a 3, it's you can figure it out in like half an hour.
yeah, right. Well, what do you think about the skill of writing prompts? Because that does tend to make a lot of difference. Where do you think like that skill comes from, and where did you learn it? How far did you learn it?
Yeah, so prompting, I know there's a lot of like buzz around prompt engineering and everything, and I think what's gonna start happening, and this has actually happened earlier on. There's this idea of stringing together keywords as your prompt, but if we look at version 5.2 of Midjourney versus version 6, version 6 actually prefers long written out sentences and paragraphs. It's actually more akin to ChatGPT output than before. So I feel like prompt engineering, I know is like a big thing. It's probably going to go away soon because AI is going to get so good at the point where it can take your basic writing and just do the thing. So you're writing
Hmm.
like remove this object and it'll know and it will remove that, or describe this to me and it'll generate prompts and you just copy that and drop it into Midjourney. I mean, that's I think the prompting to some degree is still relevant. Like I think this idea of telling ChatGPT like, oh, you're the architect and I'm the client, that's still relevant, but that's like a very simple thing to learn. I think it was much more difficult when you had to be very careful about your keywords because it didn't understand how a human would communicate with it. So I think that's going to change. I think it's going to change and be more casual.
Hmm. That's really interesting because I felt like the prompt was a little bit like a language that we had to learn, but was sounds like what you're saying is instead Midjourney is learning the human language a bit more instead.
Exactly. I think it's completely flipped. And I was actually really surprised when version 6's like patch notes said like, oh, it get rid of the garbage. Because like before we
Mm.
would write like you know, hyper realistic, 8K, 4K, all these keywords. And it's just like,
Hmm.
no, we don't need that anymore. Just say like realistic photo of so and so, and it'll do that. So we're no longer like focused on all these extra keywords or garbage, as Midjourney says now, to add, which is great because that reduces the amount of like things you need to think about. And anyone with any ability with writing is just writing like you would talk to, somebody through a text message. And I think that's really where it's going to go because I'm sure like OpenAI's realize that people don't want to learn this extra skill. They just want to communicate it naturally.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, then, more people can use it, I guess that opens it up even further.
Exactly, exactly. I think that's what it is. I think they want to remove that required skill set and just make it more accessible, more mainstream, more money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are you still using Midjourney on Discord? I remember reading that it was coming off Discord, but is that
Yeah,
true?
I don't, I mean, I feel like they've been saying that since day one. I mean, it'd be great. They keep talking about this web only portal. I think it'd be great. It is really annoying for us to like have to generate Discord accounts for people to use Midjourney, and
And yeah, the
I,
way that you have to like search back for your stuff, I feel like that puts people off, but then not enough because obviously everyone's using it.
yeah, like it's so good that people will like deal with how clunky it can be. And I really hope the web interface comes out at some point and just like simplifying things. Like in my mind, there's really no need to have like the forward slash and then type in imagine and then click imagine prompt and then type everything. Like there's a lot of things you do like 100 times a day. Like I think it's gotten to this point where their UI designers can strip away some of that clunkiness.
Yeah. What about Stable Diffusion? What programs are you using to do the work? Like you described Veras and Stable Diffusion. What program do you use? Or do you use a different variety of ones? Like LookX or Comfy UI or something like that?
Yeah, so Varus has really been our go-to, mostly because of how easy it's been to deploy, like on an enterprise scale. Stable Diffusion is a little trickier because like you need like an actual like server to set up everything, and the UI is not that great. Again, I go back to this example of like the studio, they're not specialists, like they're just designers, trying to do their job. So using a tool like Veros, which is literally just a pretty UI on top of Stable Diffusion, has been huge. LookX, I've been a little, I don't want to say like concerned about, but I personally feel like one of our competitors is running LookX, and
Hmm.
I'm a little hesitant to upload anything there. Like the Veros devs, I know them well. We meet all the time, and like we talk about what's going on with their data. So I'm very comfortable on that side. LookX, I don't know. I think it's great. I think their UI is like super in depth and it's kind of like Stable Diffusion, like exposed to a very high degree, but I think it's a little too much for our uses. I feel like Veras strikes a really simple balance of like the functionality we need and what we want. Because like people don't want to go through all those different settings and like sure it's
Mm.
super helpful, but people just want, a couple sliders and some text. Like that's the reality of it. We've got other things to worry about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't even think about that. The concern for the security of the stuff that you're uploading, because it's a tool that's, I guess, online. Like if it was just, if it's like 3ds Max or something like that, or like SketchUp, you're not worrying about who's seeing because they're sort of secure. But is
Exactly.
that the idea because they're online? They
It's partly that, and like we don't know where the data is stored, and like we deal with a lot of sensitive projects,
sure.
things that are just like unannounced or like large scale, urban scale. So that's why there's always a security concern on that front. So a lot of what I'm doing is just making sure that any tool we're using is encrypted and nobody can like trace this back to us or can see what's being uploaded because some of it can be those famous napkin sketches, right? Like we don't want our
Hmm.
competitors seeing what we're doing, especially on the same project. So yeah, that's a huge part of it. But all that's been vetted through Veros and all that
Yeah.
and Midjourney stealth mode.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andy. We're coming to the end of our time. Is there anything else that you think people should know about AI or about XR or any hopeful words for the future?
Yeah, I think yeah, I think the big thing with AI is like it's here to stay and like I know it's like, oh, it's like another buzz, like a buzzword, like metaverse. I think this is completely different from something like the metaverse. A little tangent, but I never really understood how the metaverse would work because they're just virtual spaces, and we've been doing this for forever. There was no real reason to occupy or use the metaverse. But with AI, we're talking about like improving your writing, right? Or writing translations, generating itineraries like in seconds or improving your writing or generating images. Like there's so many more useful use cases than some of the other buzzwords. And I think the other thing is like I think overall it sounds intimidating, like what's going on with AI, but like once you get into it and you start using these tools, it's really not that bad. I think everyone makes it sound like super depressing and like, oh, Terminator and it's the end of times. Like we're so far away from that. Like we're we're safe. I think that's like my closing words. Like just stay up with the tech and like use it. Find a way to use it. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. Like don't be scared. Don't shy away from it. It's here to stay. Mark my words. Quote me in 20 years. But it's here to stay to some capacity. And
Yeah.
if you think of all the different tools that are adopting AI and making it part of the user experience, if you think about like Microsoft Copilot, like it's literally built into Windows 12 OS, like the computer that we use every day, it's there. Same thing with our phones. Our phones are getting AI companions and assistants. So that's why I think this is very different from any other buzz thing in the past.
Yeah. So learn it, be aware of it, embrace it to at least some degree,
Exactly,
and try and
exactly.
stay on
Don't be
top of
scared.
it. Don't be
Exactly.
scared.
Yeah. And this is one to hang around with.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. It's been great, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. I mean, it's been really wonderful that you've been so open and transparent, and also generous with your knowledge. It's going to be very helpful for everyone in the art quiz community, and I guess architecture and art as well, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great. Yeah, and if anyone has questions, please feel free to follow up with me. Like you were saying, I love talking about this stuff. I don't think there's anything to hide. I think that just like hurts the industry if people are black boxes. I think it's important that we're talking about the actual like use cases and purpose of AI in our day to day.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, excellent. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to write comments on the YouTube here. I'm gonna give your LinkedIn, Andy, so people can actually get in touch with you personally if you want them to as well. And we can keep this conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, connect with me, shoot me a message. Yeah, happy to talk about this.
Amazing. Thank you so much.